Hi everyone and welcome back to my garden. At the end of the last video I said I was going to do a video a month. For example, a video for October, November, December, etc. And as you can see, that did not happen. The reason I didn't do it mainly is because there's just less happening in the garden in October, November, December. So I said I would just put together a couple of months into one video instead. In September we had a few little bug visitors to the garden. In October I decided to plant some plants from my temporary nursery into the ground so that they could get settled before the start of the winter. So I planted the irises that I bought from Farmer Gracie, and I also planted some purple linarias that I bought to complement the pink and peach ones I already have. I love purple and it's kind of one of the colour themes of this garden. There was some very heavy rain in October, and as you can see, the drainage problem, after all the work gone into it, really hasn't been fixed at all. So in one sense it's probably a good idea that I want to extend the patio, because the patio will go over the worst drained bit of the garden. At the back of our garden is a hedge of hawthorn trees, and they are covered in a lot of ivy, and sometimes I don't know whether that's a good thing for the trees or not. I know it's not like parasitic, but when I see moments like this when there's loads of wasps swarming around the berries, it's just like a really good reminder to me how important it is for them and how important they are to our ecosystem. October was also when I started to plant some bulbs. I ordered bulbs from Farmer Gracie. I got more crocuses, more camassias in some different colours. I got some snakehead fritillaries, alliums and tulips. So there was quite a lot to plant. I also had on my list of jobs before winter to tidy up my temporary nursery in the back garden. And I also wanted to plant some more plants so that they had time to kind of settle into the ground over winter before the new growing season. So my nephew came over to help me. We planted this honeysuckle in front of the shed, which I hope will grow up eventually and give a nice scent. And he also dug some holes for a hedge at the back of the garden so that we can have a little bit more privacy. I chose pyracantha mainly for its wildlife benefits. I didn't get all of my bulbs planted in October, so I had to continue planting them in November, which was still plenty of time, but I think I possibly overstretched myself with how many I bought. I also started to mulch the garden, or as my mum describes it, put the garden to bed for the winter. In between mulching, I came across this absolutely gorgeous Achillea called Love Parade from this place called River Lane Nursery. So of course I had to get some, and I planted these in between mulching the garden. I can't wait to see the colour of them next year. My mum gave me a really good tip actually for remembering where you planted your bulbs. If you put a bit of grit on top of the soil of where you planted it, it's an easy way to mark where they are without disturbing other plants. It took me about 8 or 9 bags of mulch to cover the whole front garden in a really decent layer of it, but I was happy that the garden had been put to bed for the winter. 2, after I put down the mulch, I noticed these tiny little mushrooms growing in it, which I thought was really cool, and I hope it's a sign of good soil health. The weather in November was a really mixed bag. It was very mild, and then also we had a snowstorm for a few days, and then it went back to being mild, so it's very strange. At the end of November though, I happened to be in West Cork, and I have followed Future Forest Nursery for a while, so I went to visit them and ended up buying 3 of these crab apple trees called Malus, Toringo, Scarletta. Ever since we moved into this house, I've been thinking about this fence between us and our neighbour and how it gives some privacy but really not a whole lot. And I would like to have something really pretty here that also increases the privacy for both of us. I'd thought about a lot of different ideas, but was never really sure about anything until I came across the idea of espaliered trees. I love the idea of trees with flowers and fruit because, again, this garden is about wildlife. I got 3 of them, and I hope to install a frame for them to grow on and eventually become a kind of living privacy screen. December brought lots of soft light and gorgeous yellow and brown colours in the garden, except my grass, which got flattened unfortunately, and I still don't know why, but anyway. As I was saying, it had been a very mild winter so far, so there are still things flowering in December, like this geranium. I think it's called Rosanne. And even the bulbs in our lasagna pots were starting to grow, and the muscari were also shooting. Now, in fairness, they did do this last year, and they don't flower until March, or they didn't last year, so I don't know if this is normal for them or whether it's just the new normal with climate change. I had the most enchanting visit by a bunch of goldfinches. I do have a seed feeder in the back garden, so they have been hanging around, but this was the first time I had seen them in the front garden actually eating seeds from plants. Firstly, I did not know that they eat seeds from verbena plants, and I would encourage anyone to plant verbenas in their garden with the hope of maybe getting a visit. They also eat the seed heads from Rudbeckia plants, but I did know this already because I saw them eat them from my mother's garden last year. Christmas Day came, and again the weather was very, very mild really, so there was just more growth of the things that had already started to sprout at the start of December. My brother made me a garden arch as a wedding gift, and he actually made it during the summer, but between the jigs and reels it never made it into our garden until the Christmas holidays. So he came over with my nephew to install it in the garden for me. I'm thinking of maybe growing something like a climbing rose or a clematis at the moment, but that idea will probably change. As the year was coming to a close, I noticed that this clematis in the front garden started flowering. My mum gave it to me, so I don't know the exact name, but I think it might be called winter bells, and it is specifically a winter flowering clematis, and I just think it's really cute. I noticed there's also some other signs of spring on the way. I noticed there was a couple of crocus leaves starting to sprout. In the new year, even though the winter had been very mild thus far, we got a really sudden sharp freeze or frost for about a week at the start of January, and it left a really beautiful frost effect on so many of the plants. And then, just as suddenly, the cold stayed, but the rain came back really heavy. Like, I have never seen water like there was in the back garden that bad in the few years that we've lived here. It was also sleeting at the same time, so it was mainly rain and cold, but you can just see how bad the flooding in the garden was. I think it's not going to get any better with climate change, so I really need to think about how I'm going to tackle this. And I had a sudden epiphany of maybe putting in a raised bed over this area so that anything that I plant there will survive the winter. But at the moment it's very much just a notion. I don't really know how practically that'll work out. My husband and I have decided that we want to get some dogs this year. So in order to get ready for that, we had to make the back garden escape proof for dogs. So him and his dad started putting up a fence during January after that really bad frost/rain had passed. And as they had finished it, or done 90% of it, the frost came back and the weather has just been kind of crazy in January overall. It's been pretty cold and wet, which means the garden is really mucky and just totally sodden. But there is a silver lining to everything, and at least the blackbirds are happy. As the month comes to a close, I see there's a couple of things starting to flower in the garden, like these saxifrage, the centaurea or centaurea, I never know how to say this plant name, sorry, the winter flowering clematis, and actually the snowdrops that I planted in the green last year are actually starting to come back, which I'm so surprised by and very excited about it. And there are also little crocus flowers starting to appear, so spring is really on the way. I know that February is not spring in the meteorological sense, but in Ireland the Celtic calendar actually has spring starting in February. So I'm going to call next month the start of spring, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I just want to say thanks so much for watching this video, and I think now that spring is starting next month, I'm going to do a video a month from now until maybe like September time, and then just do like one longer video that'll cover the winter. So hopefully I will see you at the end of next month. Take care.